There are so many conspiracy theorists out there always using the megaphone and proclaiming they're lying to you. And they can be anyone. NASA, WikiLeaks, the US military, you name it. Some corporation or some government entity is probably hiding a bunch of stuff from us at this very moment. Well, we better investigate and take a look at 5 things the public isn't supposed to know. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. CIA mind control experiments. From the scary department comes something called Project MKUltra, and it was the cover-up name for a series of clandestine experiments by the Central Intelligence Agency centered on controlling human behavior through chemically, psychologically, and subconsciously administered mechanisms. It was an attempted mind control operation that ran for over 2 decades and involved multiple violations of privacy, consent, and medical ethics. The project was launched in 1953 and included about 149 experiments in total. Most of the data found and what the experiments entailed from MKUltra has been lost due to the systematic and ordered destruction of most of the project's documents in 1973 amidst panic over the Watergate scandal. What info could be garnered from the remaining documents detailed some disturbing stuff. US citizens were being administered mind-altering drugs, such as LSD, in order to influence their behavior. Several of these experiments involved, quote, unwitting human beings, unquote, according to the Senate hearings from 1977, including prostitutes, hospital patients, prisoners, and students at universities, including Harvard. Experiments also involved the realms of hypnosis, sleep, and the subconscious, truth serums, and behavioral training involving sensory deprivation and forcing LSD trips on subjects who refused to comply. The LSD experiments, which are the best recorded, had a heavy impact on those subjected to them. It wasn't uncommon for CIA operatives themselves to be exposed to LSD through their food, drink, or even cigarettes. One operative, Frank Olson, was working for the CIA as a bacteriologist for research into biological warfare. Olson was reportedly dosed with LSD, and a little over a week later, flung himself from a high window of the Statler Hotel in New York. Though his death was ruled a suicide by government officials, a later autopsy of his body revealed cuts and head trauma, suggesting someone murdered the poor guy. One of the stranger things included in MKUltra was the study of ESP for the purpose of tapping into the minds and activities of Soviets. Though several of the documents detailing the experiments that took place have been destroyed, one grant proposal document detailed that, quote, mediums, children, and psychotics, end quote, were all candidates for testing. Though the 1977 congressional hearings conducted by Frank Church and Senator Ted Kennedy brought MKUltra to light, little came from them. Several of the operatives involved in the project who possess knowledge of the destroyed documents are now deceased, and some of them at suspiciously young ages. What truly happened, what was discovered, or even if the government is still continuing the experiments, remains unknown. Number 4. Grand Central Terminal's secret rooms. If you've ever visited New York City, you've probably made a pit stop at one of the city's most iconic landmarks, Grand Central Station. The station first opened in 1871 and was declared a National Historic Landmark in the US around 1976. From the very beginning, Grand Central Terminal was intended to benefit both public and private interests, an arrangement that continues to this day. An extensive rehabilitation project in the 1990s restored Grand Central Terminal to its original glory, while the addition of retail stores and restaurants have made it a popular destination for both tourists and residents alike. However, the station has a few secrets hidden within its walls that most of the 70,000 commuters who pass through it daily don't know about. 9 stories below the lowest floor sits a bunker known as M42. And you won't find this thing on a single map or even the blueprint of Grand Central Terminal. It's rumored that during World War II, the bunker had guards with shoot-to-kill orders for fear of sabotage while the station's trains were being used to ferry troops into and out of New York. M42 houses a converter that's responsible for providing all of the electricity that runs through Grand Central. Here, the alternating current becomes direct current and provides power for the transportation of more than 1 million people each week up and down America's East Coast. The next hidden secret is Grand Central Terminal's secret tennis club. The Vanderbilt Tennis Club is located in the little-known annex of the station, which, until the 1960s, was used as a CBS television studio until the Vanderbilt Tennis Club took over and converted them into tennis courts. These tennis courts were operated by now President Donald Trump from 1984 until 2009, when they were briefly turned into a conductor's lounge. The conductor's lounge still exists, alongside a smaller ports facility and a singular tennis court. The tennis courts are technically open to the public, but the price of renting the court is between $100 and $250 per hour. The club also only books 1 week in advance, which means you can't play there on short notice. Also below the elaborate station is Track 61, which is not on any train station map. Track 61 was built for wealthy travelers arriving on private trains and has a freight elevator that rises to the garage level of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. This track is famously thought to have transported Franklin Delano Roosevelt to hide the fact that he was wheelchair-bound due to polio. Number 3. UFO in the USSR. During the 1940s and 1950s, UFO mania gripped the US as reports of flying saucers, men in black, and alien abductions filled newspaper pages. But as alien encounters became a sideshow in the States, their communist enemies were also being rocked by mysterious encounters with UFOs. Around the same time, the Soviets also began to have increasing contact with apparent aliens and growing reports of spacecraft entering airspace over Russia. Throughout the Cold War and the space race, Soviet forces frequently clashed with UFOs. Kremlin bigwigs would pass off any public reports of the phenomena as a hoax perpetrated by Western powers. A secret research program called SETKA, or SETKA, was established in 1977 after the Petrozavodsk incident in which 48 UFOs appeared in the atmosphere across the Soviet Union. For the record, that's Petrozavodsk. The incident came to a head in the industrial city of Petrozavodsk when a huge glowing object appeared overhead, seemingly beaming shafts of light towards the Earth. The aim of the program was to work out what the UFOs were, with Soviet higher-ups acknowledging the craft couldn't be of Earthbound origin. According to Paul Stonehill, Soviet-born UFO researcher and author, most of the archives of the program remain under lock and key. But, he added, it was passed down between the communist state's top military minds and scientists. Forms were also then handed to any Soviet soldier, sailor, or airman who reported a UFO encounter for them to file fully detailed reports. And as a surprise, a bloody encounter between an alien craft and Soviet forces apparently occurred in 1953, shortly after the death of Joseph Stalin. The large UFO, initially thought by witnesses to be a blimp or some kind of zeppelin, appeared above the taiga in Siberia. Soviet military bigwigs dispatched a special military detachment to the area. When they attempted to engage the craft with aircraft, the 3 Soviet planes just burned away. A secret order was issued to Soviet forces during the mid-1960s, giving Russian commanders strict instructions to not shoot at UFOs and leave them alone. But despite these violent clashes, he says most Soviet encounters were characterized by alien craft simply observing activity. Mr. Stonehill has spoken to former military intelligence personnel, government officials, and Soviet scientists to reveal the depths of the Soviet UFO encounters. There's a lot more out there, read up. Number 2. The government seizes and searches all internet and text communications which enter or leave the US. Bit of a mouthful. This should probably come as no surprise, but we'll tell you anyway. In 2013, the New York Times reported that the National Security Agency, or NSA, secretly collects virtually all international email and text communications which cross US borders, in or out. The NSA isn't just intercepting the communications of Americans who are in direct contact with foreigners targeted overseas, a practice that government officials have openly acknowledged. It's also casting a far wider net for people who cite information linked to these foreigners, like a little-used email address. To conduct surveillance, the NSA is temporarily copying and then sifting through the contents of what's apparently most emails and other text-based communications that cross the border. Some senior intelligence official who, like other former and current government officials, spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the topic. Anyway, he said the NSA makes a, quote, clone of selected communication links, unquote, to gather the communications, but declined to specify details, like the volume of the data that passes through them. Americans' communications singled out for further analysis are handled in accordance with, quote, minimization rules to protect privacy approved by the surveillance court. If private information is not relevant to understanding foreign intelligence, it's deleted. If it is relevant, the agency can retain it and disseminate it to other agencies. Stuart Baker, a former general counsel for the NSA, said that such surveillance could be valuable in identifying previously unknown terrorists or spies inside the United States, who unwittingly revealed themselves to the agency by discussing a foreign intelligence indicator. He cited a situation in which officials learned that Al-Qaeda was planning to use a particular phone number on the day of an attack. There's been no public disclosure of any ruling by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or FISA, explaining its legal analysis of the 2008 FISA law and the Fourth Amendment, as allowing, quote, about the target, end quote, searches of Americans' cross-border communications. But in 2009, the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel signed off on a similar process for searching federal employees' communications without a warrant to make sure none contain malicious computer code. Check to see if we're still here tomorrow. Number 1. Spy Kitties. Meow. Project MKUltra, the CIA's infamous human mind control project, wasn't the only thing that was going on in the 60s. The Central Intelligence Agency recruited the most unusual field agent, a cat. Dubbed Project Acoustic Kitty, the grim, multi-million-dollar program was developed over a 5-year period in the 1960s as a novel but gruesome new eavesdropping method. A cat's tail was used as an antenna, and a wire traveled all the way up its spine, connecting to a microphone in its ear, while a battery was housed in its chest. Cats are infamously disobedient, but the CIA believed that with the right training, they could become spies. The organization also wanted to exploit another of the animal's traits: curiosity. It thought that a cat wired to record sounds would be able to come and go unnoticed, and with the use of audio cues, could be controlled to go where it would record interesting sounds, like talks between Soviet leaders, for instance. The cruel story of the acoustic kitty in its most basic form crops up in a number of places. According to Victor Marchetti, a former assistant to the CIA's director, it basically involves creating a Franken-kitty. They slit the cat open, put batteries inside him, and then wired him up. In other words, they made a monstrosity. Gruesome stuff. Creating a high-tech cat was no small task in an era of reel-to-reel audio recording and room-sized computers. Not just that, the cats still had to look like cats, with no weird protrusions, wires, or suspicious scars. After testing on dummies and live animals, the project was ready to move forward, and the first acoustic kitty was created. On that first trip out, though, don't laugh, please, the cat was hit and killed by a taxi while crossing the road. It never even made it to the target. Putting the cat through all that and then, By 1967, the project was scrapped, along with the remains of Acoustic Kitty. A heavily redacted memo titled Views on Trained Cats, held in the National Security Administration archive at George Washington University, suggests that the project wasn't viewed as a total failure. The discovery that cats can indeed be trained to move short distances was in itself a remarkable scientific achievement, according to the memo. If any further acoustic kitties were created, the documentation hasn't come to light, but the advent of tiny computers and high-tech spy equipment has likely been part of the reason the project hasn't been revisited. It's not that we've gotten better. If the technology wasn't there, we'd probably still be slicing cats open. Hope you enjoyed the video, Top Fivers. If you haven't already, check out our other channel, The Brilliant, to enjoy even more amazing list videos. There will be a link in the description, so make sure you go check that out, as well as all of our other